Drama in the Moscow City Council chambers. Are they breaking up? Okay, fully kidding. How's it going, y'all? Aiden Anderson here with the Moscow Minutes. Things took an interesting turn Monday night at the Moscow City Council meeting. Mayor Betke jinxed us. He said the meeting was only going to take about 45 minutes, and it ended up being nearly 2 hours long. In this video, I'll be breaking down the items that were discussed at the city meeting on March 4th and going through the City Council's lively discussion. The first item that came up was a public hearing regarding an ordinance amending Moscow City Code. Specifically, City Code Title 4, Chapter 3 regarding self-storage facilities. City staff member Mike Ray conducted a presentation in which the code amendment, put together by the city's Planning and Zoning Commission, or P&Z, was unpacked. The short of it is this. The city has been allowing the development of more efficient and innovative housing as a means of using infill rather than sprawl to provide for housing needs in Moscow. This has, in turn, created a need for more storage options for people in the city. Previously, self-storage facilities were limited as to what zones they could be built in. The P&Z thus put together an amendment that allows for such facilities to be built in more commercial and residential zones throughout the city. Mike Ray then went through the new regulations and requirements for self-storage facilities contained in the newly amended city code. As it was a public hearing, the mayor then heard live testimony from folks in the audience. Former city council candidate Evan Holmes was there, and he spoke in favor of the ordinance, but with caveats. Specifically, he asked whether the city council could consider changing the setback requirement related to how far the storage facility's buildings are from the edge of the rear of the facility's property, from 10 feet to 20 feet. So, if you imagine the property line that the storage facility has, wherever the buildings start, there's a bare minimum distance that they have to be from what's considered the rear of the property, and that's what the setback requirement is. As it's written in the ordinance, the setback requirement is 10 feet before buildings can start being built. And Evan was wondering if the council could consider changing that setback requirement to 20 feet, just to clarify that. Moreover, he asked if a conditional use permit could be made a requirement for such a facility's construction, rather than it being permitted use and covered in parts of the design work that goes into building such facilities. Testimony was also received from Miriam Kent, a storage unit user herself, who asked about the possibility of mitigating noise when it came to folks using such facilities, particularly in residential areas where they might be constructed in the future. At this point, it was the council's turn to deliberate. At first, there was general consensus around the need for this ordinance to go through in order to meet the needs of the city. There was some conversation about the points brought up during the public hearing portion, particularly around the conditional use permit and 20-foot setback suggestions. This resulted ultimately in a motion from Councilmember Gina Teruscio to approve the ordinance with an added amendment changing the setback requirement from 10 feet to 20 feet. This motion was seconded by Councilmember Julia Parker, and that's when things got interesting. The conversation immediately turned into whether or not the 20-foot requirement was worth it and whether it would be impactful or not. Safety concerns as well as limited space use concerns were tossed around before the council voted, and the vote was a 3-3 tie. In this situation, it means the mayor has to step in and break the tie one way or the other. Citing the extensive work and contingencies which the P&Z had put into the original ordinance, Mayor Betke voted no, and urged the council to reconsider the ordinance as it was originally written. A few more minutes of discussion later, and Councilmember Sandra Kelly motioned to approve the ordinance as it was originally written, with a second by Gina Teruscio, who originally made the amended motion at the beginning of this discussion. This new motion, the one for the ordinance that was originally written, passed 5-1, and the ordinance amending City Code was then approved. Item number 2. A resolution in support of the Latah County Library District, expressing confidence in its Board of Trustees and library directors. This resolution was put together in response to proposed legislation at the Idaho State House. Other cities such as Aberdeen, Blackfoot, Shelley, and Firth have put forward their own very similar resolutions. I believe the proposed legislation in this case is Senate Bill 1289, which deals with procedures to restrict minors from accessing certain materials at public libraries, and allows parents to pursue legal action against libraries who do not abide by these procedures. Discussions surrounding this bill have been mixed, to say the least, with some folks speaking against the concept of banned books, and others speaking in favor of preventing kids from accessing pornography. But rather than opening that can of worms, let's see what the city council talked about.
This is a hard thing to say. So I am totally in support of our library. It's a great asset. I think it's extremely unfortunate that libraries have been attacked both in Idaho and nationwide. But this is kind of odd for us to do. Like, we don't usually do this. We really on council have stuck to more nonpartisan things in running the city. So I'm just curious why this particular resolution and not a resolution on women's right to choose, LGBTQ issues, a lot of things that a lot of us would support. And, why this one? That's my question.
As you just saw, Julia Parker acknowledged the somewhat partisan nature of the resolution, which is something the city doesn't usually get involved with. Why put together a resolution on this issue and not on other similarly partisan issues? The answer to Julia's question eventually came from City Supervisor Bill Belknap, saying that the city provides financial support to the library building and thus has a say in its operations distinct from the particulars of the issue. So, at the state level, this is a library issue. The Moscow City Council helps support the library building, therefore it's a city issue as well. There was some substantial back and forth on this one, with each of the councilors expressing support for the library district while not being as sure about the resolution itself. Sandra was the strongest, standing in support of the resolution and the need to stand by our libraries in this time of need. Drew Davis was the strongest in opposition to the resolution, stating that such a resolution would be too easy to ignore and preferring a face-to-face conversation with the lawmakers, our representatives here in District 6, instead. Haley Lewis expressed concern about the possible direction the legislature might take if they passed this bill, and if the city also passed this resolution, while Gina expressed concern about setting precedent when it came to making resolutions about partisan issues like this. But after discussing these issues, at the end of the night, the resolution did in fact pass 5-1. Meetings like this are typically few and far between, but seeing consensus form out of debates like this is always interesting. And I learned way more about storage units than I was ever expecting to learn from a Moscow City Council meeting. If you want to watch all 2 hours of the meeting as I did, the city always live streams their meetings on their YouTube channel. We'll have a link posted with this video in case that's something that you want to check out. And as always, please reach out if you have any questions. This is Aiden Anderson with the Moscow Minutes. We'll see you next time.